Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and remember to subscribe. You can also follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon. Battery supply, charging networks, manufacturing. We're always told these are the main reasons no one can compete with Tesla when it comes to EVs. And with good reason too, because it's absolutely true. Due to the fact that Tesla have been working on innovating EVs for significantly longer than anyone else. But there is the other major competitive advantage Tesla has, that no amount of money can buy. That would be the data that Tesla collected over all this period from their cars with FSD capabilities. But actually, believe it or not, Tesla have very little data for FSD, even despite what they've actually achieved so far to the levels we're witnessing, particularly now with version 9 beta. Let's discuss just what an advantage Tesla truly have with FSD. I would also suggest listening to the end, as I've discovered something interesting about what this means for robotaxis. Okay, I say how little data Tesla have, but in reality, it's a lot more than the competition. What are the competition? I believe Waymo comes in after Tesla on data collected for taxis, although there are a few other Chinese equivalent self-driving taxi companies too. Google owns Waymo, while the Chinese equivalent of Google, Baidu, even has their own version. But I think last we heard, Waymo may have achieved about 20 million miles or so of real-life data, not simulated. It might be more now, it could even be as high as 50 million miles. But this is 50 million miles of Waymo employing people to be driven by these awful-looking taxis. These are robotaxi equivalent competitors, so what about actual FSD? Well, we looked to Mobileye there. On their website, Mobileye claim over 60 million cars are equipped with their technology, providing 3 million miles of data every day, or about 1 billion miles a year. They've also recently shown one of their engineers driving autonomously around New York City, and the car did a relatively good job. But remember, this is a produced video from Mobileye themselves, compared to the Tesla FSD beta testers that purposely push FSD to edge cases to see how it handles. And of course, it uses Lidar, which means geomapping every city, town and road, which may not be as easy to scale. However, they could have collected a few billion miles of data by now. But the relevant data collected is packed into small capsules called road segment data and sent to the cloud. They're not sending video like Tesla. It's simply an inferior data collection process. It also requires 11 cameras and obviously Lidar, and can be supposedly retrofitted. Can you just imagine how good that would look on your car? But even if it was incorporated at the OEM level, then it's a big expense and would require a redesign for every car model. After 4 years of autopilot, Tesla managed to collect 1 billion miles of real driven data. This is 20 times as much as Waymo. But Tesla didn't have to pay employees to do it. No, they're so clever, they managed to get customers to collect the data for them instead. Oh, and not only that, but the customers actually paid Tesla to collect the data. Which business model do you prefer? But anyway, as I said, this was 4 years after autopilot was launched. Well, that was back in 2018. So 3 years ago, Tesla had 20 times more data than Waymo probably has today. Well, 2 years after that, Tesla was then able to bank 3 billion miles of data. 3 times as much data in half the space of time. This is what we were told by Tesla back in 2020. Now, here's what's interesting, and this is why I'm saying Tesla have only collected a small amount of data yet, because I'm talking relatively. Relative to how much data they will have in the not-so-distant future. You see, these Tesla cars that have collected billions of miles of data, well, they're still on the road, you see. And people are still driving these cars for miles and miles every single day, and Tesla is still collecting data on these cars. The average American drives 13,500 miles a year, Europeans are about half that at around 7,000 miles, and the Chinese supposedly slightly more than the average American. But how about we just say the average Tesla might drive 10,000 miles a year, just to keep things simple. Actually, recently before the 3 million miles for FSD was announced in April 2020, well, just before in March, Tesla also made its 1 millionth car. Therefore, around the time the FSD data figure was announced, we can assume there were around 1 million cars on the road. Okay, well, as far as I can tell, if you have 1 million cars driving 10,000 miles a year, then that's a total of 10 billion miles. Okay, some of those Teslas were the old versions that didn't have autopilot, so let's round it down to a conservative 8 billion miles. Therefore, since April 2020, we have an additional 8 billion miles of data to add onto this initial 3 billion. From the cars that were on the road at the time, taking the total to 11 billion. But of course, we have a lot more Teslas on the road since then too. In fact, since then, we have nearly 800,000 more Teslas on the road. about twice as many FSD-capable Teslas collecting data. Okay, they obviously weren't all collecting data the whole of the period, as they weren't all made at once. But from then until now, I think another 5 billion miles is easily likely, which would take our total to date of 16 billion miles of data collected. Okay, let's just review this. We had 3 billion miles just over a year ago, in April 2021. Then about 15 months after, we now have an estimated 16 billion miles of data. That is over 5 times as much data as before. This is how Tesla's AI neural network learns. You just plug more and more data into it, so it can learn how to drive better and better. The more data, the more it improves. Over that period since April 2021, the level of cars produced has obviously increased quite a significant amount. What with the Chinese factories getting started and ramping up, along with the introduction of the Model Y, as a result, production of the 2022 will be nearly twice that as it was in 2021. So, do you understand what is happening? The data is an exponential compound. I haven't heard that term before. In fact, I think I just made it up. But I'm pretty sure that's how you describe it. Let me break it down further to see if we can understand what I mean. If Tesla had only, e.g., 1 million cars on the road collecting data, then we might get 10 billion miles of data every year. After 1 year, we have 10 billion, 2 years, 20 billion, and so on. This is because the data is accumulating at a linear level. But that's the thing. Tesla are continually making cars at the same time. Now, what if Tesla were making 1 million cars a year too? Well, Tesla's data might accumulate at 10 billion the first year, then another 1 million cars on the road, meaning 20 billion miles are collected, giving a total of 30 billion miles accumulated. 3 times the first year. Then 60 billion the following year, due to perhaps 3 million cars on the road by the third year. Yes, I'm keeping numbers basic to prove a point, and I understand that a car can't do 10,000 miles a year if it was sold in December, but as you can see, the data is now exponential. So what did I mean by the data being exponentially exponential? Well, this is where it starts to get crazy. I don't have to tell you that Tesla are also building new factories so that they can make more cars. Their new factories may triple or quadruple Tesla's current capacity. And once these factories are built, then there'll be more factories on the way. Possibly even a Model 2 factory that double overall Tesla capacity again. Tesla are building cars at an exponential rate. This is where we get the second exponential. So that in our previous examples, if we now started with 1 million cars accumulating 10 billion miles of data a year, then Tesla make 2 million cars next year, then they collect 30 billion miles in the second year, the accumulating miles would thus become 40 billion total. So we went from 10 billion in the first year immediately to 40 billion the following. Then in the third year, Tesla make 3 million cars. That would mean they collect a further 60 billion miles of data in the third year, taking the total to 100 billion. I repeat, first year 10 billion, second year 40 billion, and 100 billion for the third year. This is what I'm trying to get across. Right now, we have a relatively small amount of data compared to just 2 years' time, when Tesla would have collected perhaps 10 times as much data, aka an order of magnitude. By perhaps around 2025, then Tesla could be manufacturing 5 million cars a year, further contributing to an additional 50 billion miles of data a year. Well, what if we calculate just how much data Tesla will collect through the rest of the decade to illustrate this extreme exponential? Just for ease, I'd like to use simple numbers. These numbers are going to be fairly close to what Tesla is going to achieve this year and next in deliveries anyway. And if you think they're that wrong, then simply adjust accordingly. But I'm not trying to illustrate how many cars Tesla will deliver. I'm merely trying to illustrate the power of the exponential on how much data Tesla is going to have collected in the not so distant future. But I'm just going to go with 900,000 deliveries this year and 1.7 million next year. From there, we will work with the 50% year-over-year growth rate that we've been told. As you can see in the graph, 50% production rate, Tesla hit their 20 million a year target by 2028, 2 years sooner than Elon said on Battery Day. Although they did point out 20 million by 2030 was really a worst case scenario. This is just 50% growth compounding. In case you didn't see, that's also over 40 million units by 2030. Just out of curiosity, let me know in the comments what year you think Tesla will hit 20 million deliveries. In the next graph, we can see the total number of Teslas on the road with FSD. I'm counting 1 million before this year. Tesla actually delivered their 1 millionth car in March 2020, but not all were FSD equipped. But let's start with 1 million just to keep the numbers easy. Once again, my point here is really to demonstrate the power of these exponentials. But this graph shows just how many more Teslas will be on the road each year given the delivery numbers I showed in the previous graph. Now, if we're going with an average Tesla driven 10,000 miles a year, and with the accumulating number of Teslas on the road, then this next graph shows how many miles Tesla will drive in total each year, with the number of Teslas on the road. The graph is obviously very similar to the previous graph, as it's the number of cars multiplied by 10,000 miles. But as we can see, every year there are that many more miles driven. But this next graph is what it's all about. The total accumulated miles of data Tesla has to work with. At the start of 2021, we're just going to say 10 billion miles of data, which is probably fairly close according to our prior calculations, and also an easy number to work with. Now look what happens when you start accumulating the miles of data. By some time in just 2024, we are over 100 billion miles of data. 10 times what we have now in just a few years. I mean, even having twice as much data is a big deal, surely, and possibly improve FSD by double. But 10 times as much data? It's almost unfathomable. But if we then take 4 more years of collecting data, then we're at over 1 trillion miles of data. Or 100 times what we have today, with an FSD that is already beyond remarkable. But then to have 100 times more data, I mean, isn't that going to be unfathomable what we might expect? And at that rate, Mobileye are headed, well, they'd be lucky to have accumulated 10 billion miles by then, perhaps. Tesla would have 2 orders of magnitude more data than Mobileye. In reality, it might mean that the Roadster would be so quick and smart that it could basically drive 100 miles an hour all around town and still be safer than a human driver, due to it managing to calculate any potential danger ahead of time and correcting before its occurrence. Okay, who knows how well it could drive, but you get the point. But wait, there's more. It surely can't take much longer until everyone realizes that the Lidar solution simply isn't a solution. Level 5 autonomy is the way, Lidar is only level 4, as geofencing is still required. Well, when they do realize, what solutions do they have? They would have to go down the same path as Tesla and start collecting data. Okay, some of these manufacturers produce around 10 million cars a year already. They could start adding all the FSD data collecting equipment to their cars now. It would add to the cost of the cars, of course, which might be tough for a low-cost, small profit margin company like Toyota. It makes it difficult, if there is no FSD functionality, to pass on to the cost of the consumer. Of course, they would also need to set up the AI computer too. Neural nets are not really something that are in Toyota's wheelhouse, compared to a Silicon Valley company like Tesla. Toyota have been rumoured to already be in talks with Tesla about licensing their software. Well, if this did occur, then perhaps there could be an additional 10 million cars a year rolling out with FSD, and maybe Tesla will license the FSD to other manufacturers too. This would mean Tesla collects significantly more data again, and could literally add another order of magnitude of data. Now, it looks like Tesla will open up the supercharger network. Then maybe FSD is something that they're willing to open up too. Although at this stage, they are likely chip constrained. But I'm still just talking one-dimensional here, as in collecting more data, as if that's all Tesla have been doing with FSD at this stage, sitting around idly, simply waiting for the data to arrive, which of course they are not. For starters, Tesla are continually working on what elements of the data are the most important, most effective, what's necessary, what's not necessary, like how Tesla just removed radar. That's right, Tesla's vision is so good that it no longer requires radar. Just like a human driver, we drive on vision alone. Well, not entirely. We do need to listen to what's happening sometimes too, which is the next installment in FSD to come. It will use vision and sound to assist the driving soon too. Oh, but unlike a human, the Tesla has permanent 360-degree vision. At least Tesla were quick to dismiss Lidar, yet so many other FSD competitors insist on Lidar being the way forward. For starters, it's a much more messy solution anyway. I mean, literally, it requires a Lidar to be placed on the car. Not only is that an extra expense on the car, but it's reasonably big and doesn't look particularly aesthetic, to say the least. But it doesn't stop there. It requires a lot more computing power too. It is basing everything from a geomapped area. This in turn means the car requires more powerful processors, which then uses up more battery power. In other words, when a car with Lidar FSD is driving compared to Tesla's version, it will not have as much range, everything else being equal. Although I guess a lot of them are still ICE cars anyway, which actually makes it even worse. It also means that the cars require a more powerful processor, which again adds to cost. A manufacturer like NIO may boast about how powerful their chip is, compared to Tesla's, but there's a reason it needs that much power. Of course, NIO didn't even design the chip. It's from Nvidia, and available to any manufacturer. Yeah, there's a reason Tesla designed their own FSD chip. And I didn't even mention the main reason Lidar is so bad. that we've all heard so many times before is that you have to first map out the geofenced area, which takes a long time and expense. So much so that they have to slowly do one city at a time, and then they also have to keep it up to date. Wow, what a nightmare, compared to a computer that drives itself with vision and works out what to do. Your Lidar may work in Phoenix, but it won't be able to drive you to Salt Lake City and then drive itself around Salt Lake City for you. No, I guess it would just pull over and disable itself. Or at least you'd hope. If not, it might crash. Alright, so over the next few years, along with the exponential data collected, we also have improved ways of collecting and managing the data. But this is all going to be managed with Tesla's Dojo AI computer. Well, guess what? It's highly likely that this computer will also be continually upgraded and expanded over time too. The actual physical hardware of the machine will grow, whilst, as always, computer processors continue to increase in power too, meaning that Dojo can process all this data even more efficient over time. And it doesn't stop there either. The actual software for the AI will also dramatically improve too. Better systems will be designed and improved continually. Do you understand what I'm saying now? Yes, FSD is great now, supposedly already safer than a human driver, but my point is, as exceptional as it is now, it's pale in comparison to what the FSD will be like in just 2 years' time, let alone 5, which makes me think that robotaxis really could be a possibility in the near future. Oh dear, I'm going to start getting excited about robotaxis again now, aren't I? After I recently just said it's not something I tend to focus on much these days. But now we've been spoiled. We've been experiencing autopilot for years. Sure, it was great when it was launched, but now what else is new? Yes, there are continual advances in FSD like identifying traffic lights, which, as impressive as it is still not living up to the promises on FSD that Elon has given us. So much so that now people are no longer particularly impressed. It's now considered almost binary. Either it's feature complete and legally allowed, or it's not. And it would appear, until we're at the former stage, then it likely won't move the stock price much either. The latest version 9 beta launch did nothing for the stock price. Neither did subscriptions. The market no longer cares about the continual progress FSD makes, or promises Elon gives us. It doesn't matter how much data Tesla collects and proves just how much safer FSD is than a human, unless it becomes legal. My thoughts were that the regulation might roll out in stages, starting with highways, motorways, interstates, roads that are much less complicated to navigate, and from there it will branch out to cities, towns and neighbourhoods, until it is completely passed that cars are allowed to drive themselves. In my opinion, the full legislation would be when the cars are allowed to drive on their own. But as the regulation begins, I think it will start to give investors more confidence in the fact that it will actually happen, and the stock price should gradually rise. Of course, this won't be global. Every nation will have their own idea of what is safe and when. But in reality, the longer they wait, then the more of their tax-paying citizens will die in car crashes, particularly the ones that can afford a Tesla, who likely are more affluent and pay higher taxes. This is a benefit to a nation. Aside from saving lives, if you don't have to drive in soul-crushing traffic each day, then you're likely more productive at work, or can even do work in the car. This would then in effect increase a nation's GDP. The first nations to adopt will have this competitive advantage. On the other hand, it's not like all citizens would own a Tesla at this stage though. Obviously it will build up. But with the possibility of robotaxis, it potentially means 1/5 as many people need cars in the first place. Now, we have been basing these numbers on the average car doing 10,000 miles of driving a day. But if we think about robotaxis, well, they'll be driving all the time. In other words, an average driver may drive 10 hours a week, whereas a robotaxi might be 50 to 100 hours a week. If there are too many robotaxis operational, then that'd be equivalent of the same data collection of 10 to 20 million Tesla owners. In other words, robotaxis will collect data an order of magnitude faster from the taxis. Of course, this will improve the taxi AI at such a more rapid rate that the service improves and more cars come into service, and more economies of scale kick in. Alright, given all this, it is possible that by the end of this decade, if Tesla have collected 100 times more data and perhaps improved the AI by another 10 times, then that could be argued that Tesla's FSD may indeed be 1,000 times what it is now. There are lots of people who doubt Tesla will ever be able to achieve full level 5 autonomy. There are others who like to be clever and predict that there's a 70% chance that Tesla can do it this decade or something. Seriously, where are they getting these numbers from? I don't think anyone can judge whether this is going to come into fruition this decade until we're up at a much higher level of data collection and processing. Give it a few years at least to see what level Teslas can drive themselves by then. It's far too early to start making wild predictions. But given these enormous jumps in potential progress, I think it would be obtuse to rule out FSD this early. Thanks for listening. Please hit the thumbs up and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter and talk to me on Patreon.